The 1980s were a troubled decade for British policing. The combination of divisive strikes and high-profile miscarriages of justice meant that the cops were no longer credible.
Police told us from the start that they knew we hadn't done it!
And in 1992, a TV drama revealed the tensions, political pressures, and rough justice at the very heart of the police force.
We were showing corrupt cops every week on the BBC.
It was a police show that was set very obviously, very firmly in the real world.
Shut it, you little cokehead, you're in the clear, so just shut it.
But you killed him!
And I think it was that firm hold on reality that made it stick out.
All's dead. The governor can't walk, and if you don't get off this plot, we're nicked and all.
Everybody was slightly guilty. Some people had slightly less grubby hands. We would find who had the grubbiest hands, and then we would not be able to arrest them.
Between the Lines began life in 1991 when John Wilshire, one of the writers on the bill, had an idea for a longer, more complicated drama.
I developed an idea about a policeman who was corrupt. He was the central character in a story and was being investigated. It was suggested to me that I develop it as a standalone serial. That was really what got me in to see Tony Garnett.
Tony Garnett was a legendary producer who had a history of making angry, campaigning drama. In the 1960s, he produced the groundbreaking Cathy Come Home. In the 1970s, he accused the legal establishment in Law and Order. And after spending time in Hollywood, he was keen to return to his roots in British TV drama. But cop shows just weren't his thing.
I said, I don't want to do another cop show. There are too many cop shows unless there's a real angle to it. And they said, well, how about the police investigating the police? And I said, I'll have it.
The script was called Between the Lines and revolved around the Criminal Investigation Bureau, known as CIB. They were the police force within the police force, and their job was to track down bent coppers and root out corruption.
This is policeman talking to policeman, that both sides know the rules. Both sides know what the mistakes are and the things they have to cover themselves for.
And whilst Between the Lines would put police corruption centre stage, it wasn't a left-wing polemic against the boys in blue.
If you've got my politics, some people assume that you are automatically anti-police. That's wrong. I am not anti-police.
It was never intended to be a massive exposure of police corruption.
There are two questions, however, to be made about the police. In whose class interests are they working? And the second, how do you police the police? We tried to answer both questions.
We got a green light from the BBC. We started from scratch. With nobody was on board, no cast. We started with a blank sheet of paper, really.
The hero of the series was Inspector Tony Clark, a smart, sexy, complex copper, and the success of the show would depend on getting the right actor.
He had to be a man who was believably a cop. There had to be, in his performance, a bit of detachment and cynicism. Cops like that who are doing well in the Met are very, very intelligent.
Tony Garnett invited Neil Pearson in for an interview. Pearson was an unlikely choice for such a serious role. He was better known for comedic turns in sitcoms like Drop the Dead Donkey and Chelmsford 123.
What I'd done very little of was series television, and I'd certainly never led a 13-part BBC One TV show. I knew who Tony Garnett was, really before I was an actor. The fact that I was going in for an interview was a little intimidating. At the same time, also, it was immensely flattering that he was even considering me for a show of his.
Tony Garnett wanted Neil Pearson for the show, but before he could become Mr. Between the Lines, he had to pass one final test.
One of the last things I did was ask him to come to see me in my office and walk through past a whole number of young women who were working with us so that I could ask them if he was crumpet, because how would I know? And they all nodded vigorously that he was, so he ended up getting the part.
To complement and assist the crumpet cop were his two sidekicks.
Mr. Clark, I'm Harry Naylor. Morning, Connell.
Hello, Mr. Clark.
Hello.
Here you go.
The very first shot I had to do was to open the door to let Neil Pearson into the safe house. And I said to Siobhan, I don't know what accent to use. I don't know where he's from. You know, shall I make him Scouse, or shall I just make him Northern, or shall I make him London, or what? She said, oh, I don't know. Harry was the guy who says, OK, Gov, yeah, I'll fix that, Gov. I think he was a very good bagman because he'd had huge experience and because Neil's character understood that and trusted it.
Word got out about Tony Garnett's new police series, and everyone wanted a part.
I am still a police officer. Foxtrot Oscar.
I, like everybody else my age, auditioned. And it's the only time in my life that I've said in an audition, please take me seriously for this. Yeah. I think this is completely fantastic. And they didn't take me seriously at all. I wasn't anywhere near first choice for the part, so I joined much later than everybody else did.
She saw Corbett in a cell on his own, and basically he beat the shit out of her.
I don't care at all that I was 176th choice for it, not remotely. I got to do it.
With Tony Doyle in the role of Chief Superintendent Deakin, the casting was complete, and between the lines began to reveal the grisly truth about policing the police.
The police will be harassing me, man!
Each week, Tony Clark would lead his criminal investigation team into a police station where there'd been an allegation of corruption.
DS Clark, DI Naylor, DS Connell, CIB, appointment with the CS. Could you ring him, please?
Inevitably, they'd been met with resentment, suspicion, and closed ranks.
Hasn't been used for a while.
What's the smell?
Bit of a problem with subsidence, sir. Main sewer and storm drain run into one another just beyond the back wall. Will there be anything else, sir?
No, thank you, Inspector. You've been very helpful.
Very good, then.
Between the Lines had quite a rigid formula the way its stories were told, certainly during the first couple of series, when normally the unit would be alerted that something dodgy had gone on, perhaps someone had been shot or someone was caught with their fingers in the till.
Andy, open up! Police!
They would move in, and what seemed on the surface like a black and white story soon turned into something far more darker and far more complicated.
Did you write down details of the robberies to jog Dix's memory?
No, sir.
Were you aware that he was under the influence of drugs?
No, sir.
Did you interview him for several hours before Poynton checked him in?
No.
Did you deny him access to a solicitor?
No.
Beat him?
No.
Deny him food? I think you did most or all of these things.
Prove it.
The storylines tapped into the public mood of distrust in the police, but also showed some sympathy with the individual officers who found themselves under huge amounts of pressure.
Every show that you make comes out of the context it's in, historically. The Birmingham lads, the Guildford lads and so on, and were all on our minds and informed certain episodes that we did.
All those bastards who beat up the Birmingham Six, you've seen the pictures. They all knew they were guilty, and now we know they weren't.
What we tried to do without making it formulaic was always make our heroes more villainous as we went on. So the more we could do, anytime you felt that you were being sympathetic or that our guys were being good guys, we'd reverse it.
We'll do an episode about possible sexual harassment, but let's make the male cop black to complicate the issue.
You've had it explained to you that an allegation of indecent assault has been made against you by another officer.
I didn't assault her.
If he's guilty, we're going to have to kick out a black policeman.
This way, is it, Sergeant?
In other words, we wanted it to be a battle of wits between Is it good? Is it evil? Which is which? And that I think, was what Between the Lines was about. It was not trying to be formulaic. It was trying to be as complex as possible.
The way we deal with bastards like this on my patch, Tony, is we show them a big stick, and then we hit them with it.
This is a show where it says corruption is rife through the Metropolitan Police and through the whole of the UK. And it kind of reflects the change in attitudes of the audience. Jesus! The fact that we no longer think that every single cop is going to be there for our best interest, do the best job, and generally be as straight as they can be.
The series was keen to capture the realities of policing in the 90s, and the programme makers made every effort to ensure accuracy.
We wanted to get it right. So my attitude is we research and research and research, and then we come back and make it up, because we're doing fiction. Fiction is the best way of telling the truth.
Recorded interview, March 9th, 14:20 hours, Fleet Road Police Station. I'm Detective Superintendent Anthony Clark.
You want people to listen to the big issues that a show discusses. You have to get the small things right.
In an effort to ensure authenticity, Tony Garnett sent the cast to be interrogated by real-life scary coppers.
There is a sort of refresher course that detectives go on for interviewing technique. Everybody was given an offence that they had committed, an alibi, and a weakness in their argument, which, if the investigating detectives touched on, you had to give ground.
I'd pinched something out of a house and I'd been spotted running away.
I remember getting very upset and crying, which did seem to throw them a bit, and I thought, oh, that's good. If ever I do anything wrong, I'll remember to cry.
Tom had nicked a video or something and Siobhan had double parked or whatever. I was a rapist.
Interview halted, 11:31.
The research and attention to detail paid off. Between the Lines was complex, challenging, and unsettling. Viewers loved it, and the critical reaction was almost entirely favourable.
It was all on film, very glossy. It was lit like a movie rather than lit like a studio. And it just looked a lot more sophisticated than we were used to from a BBC cop show.
It was an instant hit. I was just proud of it because it was going out as we were making, and it's very difficult sometimes to make a show if you're getting adverse reaction to it, and we weren't.
Go.
I'm going to hang him out to dry.
It's not down to us.
I'm going to have him.
It is not our brief.
I knew that the show was starting to be taken seriously when I was starting to be asked grown-up questions rather than, what's your star sign?
The tabloids quite liked us, and the broadsheets quite liked us. Lots of different kinds of people who seemed to me to be quite different from each other would congratulate me on the show.
The broadsheets welcomed a cop show for grown-ups, intelligent, layered and political. The tabloids loved the relentless cop-on-cop action.
Once we decided that sort of thing was going to happen, then it might as well happen full on.
It's least expected. Darling, no. No!
And it also allowed us to say, well, our central character, Tony Clark, is not clearly dishonest in a legal sense, but he is being dishonest in terms of his emotional relationships.
I am not screwing anyone, all right? I am not screwing anyone, you sour bitch!
Why are you doing this? Stop it!
Well, Tony Clark was a complex character, like we all are. He was in conflict, and his private life and his professional life were conducted on different principles, but they tended to get in the way of each other.
I wouldn't want you taking any chances, Governor.
Well, he's an alpha male, isn't he, Tony Clark? Drinks, smokes, all those. He's sort of a bad boy, really, but within the confines of being a policeman.
You're the life and soul.
He was sexually attracted to my character, so when someone shines their light on you in that way, that's very flattering and hard to resist. So yeah, I absolutely see why she fell for him and got herself in such a terrible state.
it was part of the character, and I didn't have a problem with it, but I knew that it was there in such profusion in order to serve as a beacon to get people. It was the fairground Barker for the show.
I mean, we did have a lot of bedroom scenes, and it was renamed Between the Sheets.
Can't keep my hands off you, can I?
He's not a bad kisser. That's always a bonus.
Once they'd got, the occasional shot of a pair of tits or my arse pumping up and down, then, we had them to talk about serious stuff.
With this 163 hanging over me, they could call me in any time they like.
You've got nothing to worry about. I remember Leslie Vicarage complaining that the only coverage she'd had was in the Daily Sport, in which there was a picture of her under the headline, Luscious Leslie getting plenty of policemen's helmet. That must have gone down well with her mum. Bless her.
And long before it was a soap opera prerequisite, Between the Lines had a strong female character who was openly and uncontroversially gay.
Playing a gay character wasn't an issue for me. I mean, people did ask me for years after. Taxi drivers were always asking me if I really was a lesbian, and I'd say, not as far as I know, but I really am a police officer. Stop wasting my time. Maureen's sexuality wasn't a problem for her. It was delightful to play her, and it was delightful to have Barbara be my girlfriend.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm here.
It was very interesting, the first embrace between Mo and Kate. And I kissed Barbara, and she had an asthma attack. I seem to remember a very hushed room filled with men sort of watching very anxiously.
Oh, Kate.
Is that what happens? Is that what they do? They have asthma attacks together? I have a suspicion that's what they thought.
The BBC was delighted with the mix of sex, cops and politics and immediately commissioned a second 13-episode series. The cast and crew saw this as an opportunity to become even more provocative.
I think we got braver. I think it was just the success of the first series allowed us to be a little bit broader with what we were doing. When I think about it, the start of Series 2 opens with Daniel Craig climbing up a mosque and putting a pig's head on it. I wonder whether we get away with that now.
Series 2 branched out into a relationship between the police, special branch, the security services, into political questions, and the turf wars between them, which were very, very big at the time.
This is Inspector Pollock, Special Branch. We have 3 intruders at Crouch End Territorial Army Drill Hall.
We get a lot more about the corruption of the wider establishment, about government, about the MI5. And it basically leaves us with quite an unsettling feeling that you can't trust very many people at all who are in charge of running the country.
On police! On the deck!
There was a turf war between MI5 and the Special Branch in the police.
On police! Drop it! Inspector Hayes!
And it was, of course, being conducted under, God, can't let this out. And we received a lot of very revealing information from very good places, and were told about what was going on.
You've got to be joking. I mean, what about a procedure?
Good question. I mean, I've been looking in my book for what we're supposed to do when an MI5 man is shot on army property by a special branch officer. The chapter's missing.
The success of Series 2 was confirmed when it won the BAFTA for Best British TV Drama Serial, and the series built to a gun-toting dramatic finale.
I could shoot through brick walls, Trevor. That's the last thing I want, because I could put me along with you. That's why we've got to work something out together, huh?
Me, I'll give it to us.
The end of Series 2 had a shoot out a very complicated scenario. There is no doubt left in the audience's mind that he is drummed out of the police force and he cannot be in the Complaints Investigation Department. To us, that was drawing a line on it. That was it. That was the end of Between the Lines.
It's the biggest load of old bollocks I've ever heard in my life.
Prove it.
But despite the fact that Tony Clark was no longer a cop, nor was he investigating cops, there was a third series.
This is the private sector. No more fiestas. You get the most expensive car and you drive straight to the most expensive restaurant. It's called Expenses.
The third series got off to, I think, a fatally bad start.
He comes out of the police and becomes a kind of private investigator.
I have a job for you.
Ah. No. Thanks.
I made the mistake of taking them out of the police in order just to get a new angle, some new stories to stop me getting bored.
This is a joke. First I get sunstroke, pretty soon I'm gonna get seasick.
You're on an all-expenses-paid oboe in the Mediterranean and all you can do is moan.
One of the great strengths of the first two series was the fact it was quite a closed area. There was this claustrophobic area where the very police forces they worked for hated them, and they were working very much undercover and in the darkness and under enormous pressure. And I think once you take that away, it does lose something, no matter how good the characters are. And I think the characters and the acting is equally as good in the third series.
Phil, we're not gonna hurt you. You're lucky we might even save you. No, I'm sorry about the photo.
I always think of it, I mean, you know, it's The Godfather 3. No one watches The Godfather 3. The first two were the ones.
The show's third run limped through the first few episodes, but improved as things got political again in the two-part series finale.
All I know is that when we were in CIB, we used to shed light on things, and now we're digging holes in the back garden, do you know what I mean? Anybody at home?
The script required the characters to go to a huge right-wing gathering of European skinheads and neo-Nazis. BBC budgets didn't stretch to hire in thousands of extras for the day, so there's only one thing for it.
We went to a place called Dixmude in Belgium, which is a centre of European fascism.
We went to a rally, a right-wing rally, that was very similar, I should imagine, to the ones that were held in Nazi Germany.
We didn't stay in the town, we stayed a long way away, and we were very minimal. Neil is a seriously thoughtful, courageous man. You couldn't have asked everybody to say, right, Neil, we're heading away over here, and, you see those 10,000 people with fascists. We want you to just walk right down the middle of the aisle, and have a look round and then come out again.
I think I'd just appeared in a Labour Party political broadcast, and David Calder was in that episode, and he had a long and well-known association with the Workers' Revolutionary Party. So there were some fairly hardcore lefties. We felt a little exposed, I have to say. We kept looking at each other, David and I. We just thought, we're not going to get out of here.
And there was much more reaction to him than you ever saw.
Really, one person recognises us, we're dead.
The actors lived to tell the tale, but after 3 series and 35 episodes, the end of the road was in sight for Tony Clark and Harry Naylor.
I was insistent that they should die, or at least I should, because 3 had been enough for me. And so eventually it was resolved that we would basically blow up Suffolk.
The IRA were involved in the finale, and we had tracked them down to this barge, which I think was at Felixstowe, and was surrounded by petrol dump. It was kind of petrol dump for all the boats and all the barges around.
On your knees. Undercover security. Well, that's not true.
We're on your side.
Listen to me. Listen. Please. So why are those guns still on that boat?
Roy Battersby directed that episode, and I remember talking to him and saying, look, is this what you're going to put on the screen? Harry asks to smoke a cigarette. He says yes. And I said he lights it. He smokes it. And then he flicks it, knowing exactly what he's doing, that it's his last hope. He flicks the cigarette in.
The fate of the characters would be decided by Harry Naylor's final cigarette. there couldn't have been a more appropriate device, because Harry had been puffing away in virtually every scene since the series began.
This week, the complaints are actually about poor old Harry. Watch this.
Rather than pursue the suspect,
He smokes. He lights cigarettes from beginning to end.
who'd resisted arrest.
At the beginning of the series, and I was 2 weeks into giving up smoking, and Peter Norris said, "No, you can't give up smoking. I want you to smoke in this. You've got to smoke."
Oh, for God's sake, Harry, it's like fog in here.
Tom tried to give up smoking, and the cast came to me en masse and asked as a favour, could we write it in that Tom was trying to give up as part of it? And I said no.
I am a bit pig-headed. I said, right, I'm going to smoke every time I'm on bloody camera then, so I did.
They were trying to change his character, and I thought it was brilliant character.
I would get through about 60 to 70 cigarettes a day. Not smoking them all, but smoking a lot of them,
And in the final minutes of the final episode, Harry's discarded cigarette lands in a puddle of petrol and blows the characters to smithereens.
It just blew my mind. I just thought it was a wonderful way for Harry to go,
But reports of the death of Harry Naylor and Tony Clark were premature.
I was in Suffolk when the final explosion happened. I watched it with my very own eyes. I know those characters died. When I watched the show go out, by a miracle of editing, I wasn't quite sure whether or not they died, and nor was anybody else.
The producers may have been tempted by the possibility of a fourth series, but the actors were convinced that enough was enough.
It was time to call it a day. Tony Garnett, I think, was keen to keep his options open. I think he, like me, thought that 3 was not as good as 1 or 2, but he hadn't given up on the hope of 4 being better than all of them. So he wanted to keep the characters alive. I knew that Tony had won that argument. Tony Garnett had won that argument after that show went out, because people kept saying to me, "Did you die? We weren't sure. Did you jump off? Did you die?"
In the end, there was no fourth series, and the characters were indeed dead.
Yeah, well, we did go out with a bang, didn't we? If you think what they did in Dallas, you remember all those years ago? Tony Clark was a character who could come back from the dead, couldn't he? It would have been pretty difficult and ludicrous.
Between the Lines was one of the shows listed in the British Film Institute's top 100 TV dramas of all time, and everyone involved looks back fondly at a golden era of police corruption.
For 2 years, I was able to produce a show where I had virtually no interference, where writers were able to write subject matters close to their hearts. So you ended up with, I suppose, over the 3 years, 36, 38 single films, which was great. And to do them with high production values, to put them out at prime time, halcyon days.
I do have immensely fond memories of the making of it. I like to think it was ahead of its time. I would very much hope that if I were to watch it again, and I guess I will at some point, I would think, yeah, we did okay there.
Next week, Call the Cops pays a visit to the Sweeney. Back to tonight, though, and there's sci-fi in tonight's Tuesday night drama. The Quatermass Experiment is next.